Welcome back to the Thinking Mind podcast. My name's Alex. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. In this podcast, I'll be discussing long-term relationships, why falling in love is overrated, and what it means to fall out of love into a more satisfying relationship. One of the challenges in life is to try and deal with the way relationships and relationship dynamics change over time. In most societies, having a romantic partner is generally considered a basic part of living a full life. And yet this is part of our lives that's laden with drama that can go wrong so often and in so many ways. For many of us, it is straightforward enough to find a partner, but the difficulty often lies in sustaining a satisfying relationship over time. This is reflected in divorce rates, with the UK having an estimated divorce rate of about 42%, and the US having a divorce rate of between 40 and 50%. And even in the absence of divorce, many people are waking up to the difficulties and sacrifices involved in maintaining a long-term relationship. And these difficulties stand out in stark contrast to our increasingly individualistic culture, where a person's own pleasure, freedom, and fulfillment are often held up as the highest values worth pursuing. Our cultural conversation around how and why one should pursue a long-term relationship has remained stunningly immature, with most of the emphasis generally placed on, quote, finding the right person in order to, quote, be happy. This is reflected in reality TV shows like Love Island or Love is Blind. Even this has been made more complicated by the arrival of dating apps and social media apps like Instagram, which have turned complex human beings we could potentially form connections with into replaceable brands or commodities, like one of many products on the shelf of a supermarket. If we are bold enough and fortunate enough to find someone we connect with, then we might fall in love. Our brain tells us we are winning and releases all sorts of neurotransmitters and hormones like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. Some neuroscientists have even suggested that couples in love show decreased activity in their prefrontal cortex, reflecting their decreased ability to make negative judgments about each other. This win is mirrored back to us in the conclusion of every romantic comedy, when the designated couple in the story have finally cemented their union. In psychoanalytic terms, we idealize the person we have fallen in love with. We can't see their flaws, or their flaws don't seem to have any impact at all. That sense of loneliness, or lack, or existential dread that we had before entering the relationship seems to have vanished. We project our unconscious desires, aspirations, and positive qualities onto our partner. All of a sudden, our internal conflicts feel resolved, and we feel complete. We fantasize about how the relationship will continue to unfold into the future. The absence of judgment is liberating. A lot of our psychology, which we normally repress, can find free expression both in how we behave and how we view our new partner. Some people become addicted to falling in love, much like a person becomes addicted to drugs, and can never see a relationship long past this point. Eventually, of course, this feeling of being in love begins to fade. Experts tend to think this takes somewhere between 6 months to a few years for most people. If we don't anticipate this happening, or have any conception of how to deal with this, things are highly likely to go wrong. We can interpret the fact that we are no longer in love as meaning we have failed to find the quote right person, and break up with them and then repeat that cycle, or we can begin to punish them because they are no longer giving us the feelings of completeness that we crave. Or we can allow them to punish us for the same reasons. We can allow resentments to build up until the relationship collapses under their weight, or we can simply resign ourselves to a less satisfying relationship. So what does it mean to fall out of love well? Before we continue, just a quick word to say, if you like the podcast, there are many ways you can support it. You can share it with a friend, follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you listen. Give us a rating, or if you want to support us further, you can check out the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. So we were discussing, what does it mean to fall out of love well? Exiting the honeymoon period is painful because it involves a lot of difficult realizations. Some of these realizations are that your partner has flaws and weaknesses that you may need to compensate for, that you have flaws that your partner will notice and they may need to compensate for, that you can let each other down, that you can start to have negative feelings and resentments towards your partner, that the love you share is not necessarily unconditional, that you will not be able to meet all your partner's needs and vice versa, that you can still feel lonely or incomplete in a relationship, that you and your partner both have a dark side, and you can listen to last week's audio essay if you want a more in-depth explanation of that. Because these realizations can be painful, we defend against them in many ways. We can deny they exist, we may blame the other person, shifting our idealization to denigration. We can blame ourselves, we can emotionally withdraw. Something that happens commonly in long relationships is that the primary relationship is kept as a source of a kind of boring stability, while romantic excitement is outsourced, sought elsewhere, in the form of a physical or emotional affair, or even an affair that exists only in fantasy. Unconsciously labeling our partner as boring is appealing because boring is safe. To fully continue looking at our partner with fresh eyes in all their complexity can be a very scary thing, because this is the person we come to depend on every day. Yet, if we want a long-term relationship that is truly satisfying, it must contain both stability and excitement, predictability and novelty, because both of these are basic human needs. The honeymoon period takes care of this automatically, because embedded within honeymoon psychology is both intense novelty and a fantasy of everlasting love projected into the future. After the honeymoon period, and after we begin to have these realizations, both people in the relationship need to become a lot more proactive. The relationship ceases to merely be a roller coaster ride that we are taken on and begins to require a lot more of our agency, our design, our intentionality. This proactivity can involve a number of interwoven practices. In this section, I'd like to cover 6 relationship practices that you can employ. This is by no means a complete list, but it's intended to provoke further thought and experimentation. Number 1, communication. This is a cliché, of course, but open and honest lines of communication allow both people to express their needs, their desires, their concerns. Sharing thoughts and feelings creates an atmosphere of trust, enabling partners to work together to overcome obstacles and deepen their understanding of each other. Communication must include hard conversations, disagreements, and the airing out of resentments. Resentment, which is often built on historic grievances, mistaken assumptions, or even attachment issues, is poisonous to relationships, and levels of resentment should be kept as low as possible. Intimacy, on the other hand, is the currency all relationships thrive on, and high-quality communication both increases intimacy and decreases resentment. If you want to look at this area in more depth, you can check out an old audio essay we made, How and Why to Engage in Conflict, which we'll link in the description. Number 2, empathy. You must make a practice of regularly and earnestly putting yourself in your partner's shoes in order to understand their perspective and why they might be acting or reacting in a particular way. Like most skills, our ability to empathize can be strengthened over time. It is an incredible realization to note how ridiculous, disproportionate, or absurd our partner's attitudes or behaviors can be until we take the time to empathize with their position and realize that in their predicament we might act in a very similar way. Number 3, cultivating a shared vision. Couples benefit from discussing and cultivating shared goals, and of course there is little benefit in being in a long-term relationship unless you have shared goals which you're working towards. These can include career aspirations, family planning, lifestyle preferences. Often couples don't discuss their shared goals explicitly, and they are left unconscious within the relationship. This can prove disastrous when, for example, 5 years down the road, it becomes apparent that one person wants to get married and the other does not, or one person wants children and the other does not. Regular communication enables both people to align their visions for the future and work collaboratively towards common objectives, fostering a sense of unity and purpose. Number 4, telling your partner what you want and then rewarding them when they give it to you. One of the most common and persistent mistakes people make in relationships is to feel that the other person should know what they want automatically, as though they could read minds. People often feel that to tell a partner what they want is a form of losing, that it gives away the game, or it somehow demeans the relationship. People may feel intensely frightened of telling their partner what they want, because this carries within it an inherent vulnerability. By wanting something, I am less omnipotent and more human, and by knowing what I want, my partner also knows what I don't want, and they know how they can hurt me. This is a fair point, because as we alluded to earlier, people have dark sides and can hurt each other. But assuming there's a basic sense of trust and good faith and goodwill in the relationship, you should make it as easy as possible for your partner to give you what you want, and then when they do give it to you, however imperfectly, you should reward them. And within that reward, let them know how they can give you what you want even more effectively the next time. This applies to small things, like how you like your eggs made, or an agreed morning routine, to larger, more abstract things, like how you wish to spend your time together, how you want to be spoken to in public, or what you want for the future. Number 5, create an atmosphere where your partner is encouraged to continue growing while still being accepted as they are. Although this sounds paradoxical, people generally react strongly against harsh judgments and criticisms, but they are much more likely to continue growing if they feel accepted. Of course, we can and should provide support for our partners when they're dealing with difficulties. This means offering a help rather than giving directions, asking good questions, making optional suggestions, or acting as a non-judgmental sounding board. Number 6, do not neglect your own personal growth. Being in a relationship is not a reason to stop your own development across life. Pursuing your own personal fulfillments and figuring out how to tackle your own particular challenges. Echoing the previous point, you should ask for your partner's support while not expecting them to solve your problems for you. If both you and your partner can continue to grow personally within the relationship, you will continue to find each other to be novel, intriguing, and attractive. And it will go a long way towards maintaining a healthy romantic chemistry, especially if you can carve out time for the romantic chemistry to express itself, by making an effort to have time alone where the sole purpose is for you to have fun and connect. Conversely, stifling your partner's growth, which people might do because change frightens them, will only lead to them becoming more predictable and more resentful of you. If you're in a relationship and want things to go a bit deeper, here are some questions you might ask yourself and your partner. 1. What balance of stability and novelty do I need? 2. What difficulties am I facing right now, and what support do I need? 3. What are my personal goals and aspirations for the future? 4. What are my goals and aspirations for the relationship? 5. When do I feel the most attractive? 6. When do I feel the most attracted to my partner? 7. What needs do I have that aren't getting met by the relationship right now? 8. What would be the simplest way I could get those needs met? 9. What are some of my favorite memories from the relationship? And 10. What helps me feel the most connected to my partner? This podcast is centered around getting through the honeymoon phase of a relationship, but I just want to acknowledge there are some important, relevant topics that I haven't been able to cover in this episode, and these include why someone might choose a long-term monogamous relationship and what they might hope to get from it, how you should date and think about personality compatibility, and when you might consider ending a relationship. These topics will probably get their own episode at some point. So to conclude, while the honeymoon phase is an intense, exciting, and memorable part of any relationship, it's the most fleeting, and many people get stuck in a repeated cycle of honeymoon phases and heartbreaks without ever seeing what lies beyond them. Once you get past the honeymoon phase, a relationship will resemble many other parts of your life, in that it will not be the sole source of your satisfaction, and will return to you only what you invest in it, Not only that, but they can be risky and people can let us down. Expectations matter. You should treat your relationship like something which requires construction, cultivation, and maintenance, like a house or a garden. It is not something that is merely bestowed upon you, like falling in love is, and therefore requires work and energy. Ironically, the less you expect your relationship to automatically make you happy, and the more you are willing to give it attention and care, the happier it is likely to make you. Knowing all of this, and choosing to enter boldly into a long-term relationship regardless, there are a number of things you can do to build a strong and satisfying relationship, like having hard conversations, creating shared experiences, and providing each other with a safe harbor from life's ups and downs. But I would encourage you to come up with your own practices and experiment with them and see what works best. What about you? Do you think what we've discussed today bears any resemblance with what you've experienced or are experiencing in your relationship? If you have any feedback, you can email us at thinkingmindpodcast@gmail.com. This is the Thinking Mind Podcast, a podcast all about psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry, philosophy, and related topics. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening this week. If you've got any feedback, as always, do get in touch. If you enjoyed the episode, why not give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because it really helps other people to find us. If you want to get in touch, you can find us on Instagram or Twitter, or you can drop us an email. And if you value the show more generally, why not buy us a coffee? Thanks so much.